So, welcome back, everyone. I hope your conversation was as animated and lively as ours was. We were chatting away and thinking and really so touched by Marietta's story and her reflections, and particularly Marietta, we were just talking about how much we talk in this work about how we know the inside job, the shifts that we talk about are so essential for creating more space in the outside, right, in our outer environment. And part of what you brought to life in so many ways is how the shifts that you keep making inside yourself create more room for possibility to come in, right? And so your story enlarges our sense of what's possible. And every one of these stories, every artifact, every drawing that people make, every big idea that people share is just part of how our idea about what's possible is enlarged and helps us see where we stand. And what was meaningful to us about this artifact you made quite a while ago, out of trash, by the way, which is the other thing that we love about the way that you think about making things. It's a paper plate. But honestly, in many ways, it's the whole call in Pathfinders, right? This is what we're here doing. And so you helped us see and put that together. And so sometimes it's artifacts and art and stories that open up our sense of what's possible. And sometimes it's a big idea. And we've gone back and forth between making space for us to listen in on a multitude of stories and to share a wide range of inspiring graphics and poems and images and so forth. And we wanted to finish today by saying a little bit about this body of work called Beloved Economies, which you all have this book. So each of you received this book, and you might not even know it, and or it might be one of those things like my book pile that's buried under. But we want to invite you to spend this little bit of time thinking about 7 practices that are identified in Beloved Economies that strengthen meaning, purpose, and collective well-being. We invite you to think about how these practices are showing up in your own stories, in your own experiences, and how we heard these aspects of these practices in the story that Marietta shared with us. And together, this body of work, there's so much to say about it, just like there was Cniven, but I'm going to hold myself back and say, read the book. It has come from a very extensive review by the authors, Jess and Joanna, of 200 organizations who say they're being innovative. But after a very thoughtful, systematic research effort, they really narrowed it down to 100 and then down to 10. And this is what they want to say to us about what they learned about real innovation. That moving in the direction of beloved economies means that we're moving from top down. Okay, well, we know what we mean. We think we know what we mean when we say move from top down, but we are moving toward exercising our right to design. So what does that mean? We exercise our rights to design when we imagine, decide, and build together. When we hold the designer's pencil and sketch our individual and collective futures. So maybe we hold the designer's empanada. Maybe we bring in the Maharachi band. Maybe, as these self-advocates in Georgia are doing, is we're making something that doesn't make any sense to the rest of us, but for the people who are inside of this, they are creating a reality that they want to live into. And so here's another thing about rights to design. These rights are rooted in our universal ability to generate insight on what is the circumstances around us, even if we think we are completely limited and it's our job to keep our family member in the closet, to imagine possibilities for the not yet, those are circumstances that do not exist, and to play a role in deciding how to bring such possibilities to life. And so they invite us, beloved economies, it's another way to think about where is the energy and how are we doing at sharing and exchanging the energy between and among us. We're moving away from top down, which is also often referred to by consolidated or even extractive. And it looks like this. We depend on experts identifying and meeting needs, which Marietta will tell you in some ways she used to step in thinking that was her job. Professionals and managers who take full responsibility for health and safety. Systems agents who determine what is authorized for payment. And or specialist in how to plan. Okay, so we can all see ourselves and our organizations and the roles we fall into in the light of consolidated planning. And then in contrast, we are trying to understand what does it look like to support people, all people, to work with having important things to say and ideas about what they need for a good life and more ways to get to know people, to plan and count on many supports to help me create, co-design, to choose who provides not only my supports, but also co-design, and to direct my plan. Let's go back even to Alex, right? With accommodations. I'll come out of my room when I'm ready to come out of my room. All right. So it's one way to think about the story Marietta shared with us. So I'm going to just talk very briefly about the 7 practices and see if you see yourself. There's no one starts here and goes around. In fact, I was thinking of Beth Gallagher's reference to the kind of spaces that are co-design, co-creative, are oftentimes a big hot mess. And they're a big hot mess because we're balancing and juggling ways to shift the way we exchange our energy, support, and sense of what's possible along these 7 dimensions. So briefly, how are we doing at sharing decision-making power? How are we doing at trusting one another and respecting and learning from differences, from finding common ground? And so how are we doing at really sharing decision-making, not just changing our words, but really grappling with power, when people have lived with a huge amount of trauma and we fall into all of our conditioning and all of our roles, who's on top, who's under, who's quiet, who speaks, who has power, and who doesn't. So we know that really every story we've heard so far in our time together includes examples of moving towards shared decision-making and shared power. In our stories, we're sharing how are we doing it shifting to prioritizing relationships, right? Dedicating time and care to connect as human beings and having relationships be at the center of everything that we're doing. That takes us to this 3rd practice, reckoning with history, intentionally making an effort to address the way the past shows up and affects our work now. So really dealing with taking on culture in every way, shape, and form, and how that affects and interferes with or limits our capacity to co-create for so many, in the many ways that it does so. Our stories are all stories as we're moving in these new directions of seeking difference, not just tolerating difference, not just changing the language, but to really be purposeful in including and learning from very, very diverse voices. And in order to do that, we're finding fresh ways to source multiple ways of knowing. So let's just reference back Marietta's story, the making empanadas, the creating a ritual, the making of an artifact with whatever we have to draw from to help people see more clearly their own situation and imagine what might help support a shift in that. Well, this one cuts across all of the other ones and is hugely challenging, is trusting there is time for more of our attention to be given in the direction of co-design, relationships, reckoning with history, seeking difference, creating and exploring in fresh ways, to trust there is time to go out into a neighborhood, to encounter difference, to meet people, to say hello, to be there over time, to wait for the new to emerge. And then finally, the last one is to prototype early and often, to test ideas and decide together what best steps to take. And so that is a big idea in a really short amount of time. And it brings us back to your reflections on the day. What are we learning about co-designing with families? What are we learning about shifting our attention from top down, power over, to power with? What are our questions about co-designing with families? What are our questions about that? What are we taking with us at the organizational team level that might be something important that we want to think harder and pay more attention to? And if possible, where are the next steps that might strengthen the co-creation of what more is possible with families? Okay, so I think we'll head back into our organizational groups and see what people have to bring in to your pondering about these things.